Looking back, I really should have noticed the signs sooner. Isn't that what everyone says when they look back on the messes in their lives? The small things that, in hindsight, seem so obvious. The things you brushed off at the time because they seemed insignificant. But at the time, I just ignored them. I didn't think I'd be that guy. You know, the one whose wife ends up betraying him. It all started that evening. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just like any other night. Sophia was in the shower, and I was lounging around, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, catching up on the sports highlights I missed. Her phone was resting on the dresser, buzzing occasionally with notifications. At first, I didn't think much of it. Why would I? We had trust, or at least, I thought we did. But then a message popped up on her screen that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was simple, "Can't wait to see you." That was all it said. But it hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't the words themselves, but the context. Who was she so eager to see? My curiosity quickly turned into suspicion. Before I even realized what I was doing, my hands reached for her phone. My thumb swiped up on the screen without thinking. My mind screamed at me to stop, but I couldn't. I had to know. And what I found crushed me. Right there, in black and white, was a conversation with some guy named Ethan. At first, it looked innocent enough, but I kept scrolling. Then it escalated. Messages that got more personal, more inappropriate. And then, boom, a picture. You can probably guess what kind of picture it was. The messages went from "can't wait to see you" to things like "can't wait to see you again" and "I miss being with you." That night was so hot. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. You know that feeling when your stomach drops and you feel like you're going to puke, but you're stuck, frozen? That's exactly how I felt. I couldn't breathe as I stared at the screen, reading how my wife, Sophia, was texting some stranger named Ethan, talking about things I never imagined. My heart was pounding so loud in my chest. I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I knew I needed proof. I couldn't just confront her without something solid. She'd just lie, twist the whole thing around. So I started taking screenshots, my fingers shaking as I tried to capture every detail, every message, every photo. Once I had enough, I transferred Ethan's profile info to my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. The adrenaline was rushing through me. I stormed straight to the bathroom. The steam hung thick in the air, and Sophia was humming some song while washing her hair. The sight of her carefree attitude made my blood boil. How could she be so calm when she'd just torn our marriage apart? Without saying a word, I threw her phone at her. It landed with a loud thud, and she flinched, her eyes wide with confusion. "What the hell, Mark?" she yelled, trying to hide herself with the shower curtain. Like that was the issue. But I wasn't going to let her play innocent. Not this time. "Who the hell is Ethan?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the bathroom walls. I could see the panic hit her face. You know that look people get when they know they're caught, when there's no way out. Yeah, that look. She tried to play dumb, stammering, "What are you talking about?" Her eyes were darting around like she was trying to figure out a way to escape. "Don't lie to me, Soph," I snapped, holding up my phone, showing her the screenshots. I saw everything. The messages, the pictures, everything. Her face drained of color as the truth hit her. She started shaking her head like if she denied it enough, it would all just go away. But then, she broke down, sobbing in the shower, the water still pouring down on her like some dramatic scene out of a movie. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I snapped, incredulous. "So what? He accidentally sent you that picture? You just gave in to him without thinking about what we had? Don't insult me, sophomore." She tried to justify what she did. "It was just the way he talked to me," she said, her voice trembling. "He made me feel wanted, like I was special." Her tears mixed with the water on her face. "I couldn't help it when he sent that photo. I felt wanted, Mark. Wanted." That's when I snapped. My voice cracked as I shouted, "I wanted you. I've always wanted you. But you gave it all up for someone who doesn't respect boundaries." I couldn't listen to her excuses anymore. It all just felt like bullshit. She was trying to shift the blame anywhere but on herself. I couldn't even look at her anymore. her crying, her wet, pathetic self. So I walked out. I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. And I left. Left her there. Left the house. Left everything behind. I had no idea where I was going. All I knew was I couldn't stay there for another second. The air in the house felt suffocating, full of betrayal. I needed to clear my head, but there was no way I could do that with her still there. So I ended up at McGuire's, my go-to bar. You know the kind of place you go to when everything's fallen apart? A dark, worn-out dive where the bartender knows your name and leaves you alone if that's what you want. That was exactly what I needed. I walked in, and it felt like any other night at McGuire's. A local band was playing covers in the corner, the smell of stale beer lingered in the air, and the regulars were huddled around the pool table, cursing about missed shots. But none of that mattered to me. I just needed to drown out everything. I ordered the strongest pint they had, some IPA I didn't even care for, and started drinking like my life depended on it. With each sip, I tried to process what had just happened. How did I not see this coming? Had I really been that oblivious? Sophia and I had our ups and downs, sure, but I never imagined she would actually do this. The hardest part? As much as I hated her in that moment, there was still a part of me that didn't want to accept it. A part that kept hoping this was some kind of sick joke or a misunderstanding that I could wake up from. But then the images, the messages, those damn screenshots, kept coming back to me. And every time they did, the anger just kept bubbling up all over again. I couldn't sit there by myself, trying to process it all. So, I grabbed my phone and shot a text to Ryan. You up for a drink? I knew he wouldn't hesitate. Ryan's the kind of guy who'd drop everything for you, even if it's the middle of the night. And trust me, I was on the edge of breaking down. 15 minutes later, Ryan walked in, his leather jacket slung casually over his shoulder like he owned the place. He looked at me, took one glance at my face, and immediately knew something was seriously wrong. Man, you look like you've been through hell, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Yeah, well, you won't believe what happened, I muttered, and before I even realized it, all the words just came tumbling out. I showed him Ethan's profile, scrolled through the filthy messages, and vented all the rage and betrayal that was eating me up inside. It felt almost like ripping off a Band-Aid, laying it all out, hoping he'd understand just how much it hurt. Ryan didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the screen, eyes fixed on it like he was looking at some kind of crime scene. This guy's a piece of shit, he finally said, and for the first time that night, I felt a little weight lift off me. It was like he was echoing the thoughts I couldn't quite put into words, validating everything I was feeling. You're not staying with her, right? After this. Because if you are, you're out of your mind. I didn't know. And honestly, I couldn't answer him. My mind was spinning. Part of me wanted to throw everything away and never look back. But another part, the part that remembered our wedding, our life together, the future we talked about, wanted to fix things. I wanted to understand why she did it, why this happened. Stupid, right? But when you've spent years building something with someone, walking away isn't as easy as it sounds. Ryan shook his head, his face turning serious. Listen, man, I don't know what you're thinking, but let's be clear. That woman cheated on you. End of story. You can't forgive that. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. You can't go back to the way things were. I slammed my beer down in one gulp, the bitter taste burning all the way down my throat. Yeah, I know, I muttered, but even as I said it, I knew that knowing and doing were two completely different things. The thought of walking away from everything with Sophia felt like cutting a part of myself out. Ryan leaned back, tapping the glass of his drink with his fingers. Then, in that calm, measured way of his, he said, "Let me take care of this guy. You don't need to handle it. I've got connections. I can find out everything there is to know about this guy, who he is, where he works, where he lives. I'll make sure he understands what he did." That offer hit me like a ton of bricks. Ryan had always had a reputation for finding things out, stuff most people would never know. And if I'm being honest, part of me wanted to know everything about Ethan. Who was he? What was his deal? But more than that, I wanted him to regret ever getting involved with my wife. Do it, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. I didn't care about the danger or the mess it might cause. I needed to do something with all this anger, and if it meant going after this guy, then that's what I'd do. We set a plan to meet again in a few days, once Ryan had gathered everything. I left the bar that night not feeling better, but feeling like I had some kind of direction, like I had a way to channel this rage into something. When I got home, the lights were still on. Sophia was waiting for me. Her eyes were red from crying, and the second she saw me, she rushed over, practically throwing herself at my feet. "Mark, please," she begged, crying and grabbing onto my pants. "Please, just listen. It was a mistake. A stupid, stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. Please, let's talk. Let's fix this." I just stood there, looking down at her. I used to love those eyes, green, soft, always bright when she laughed. Now all I saw was nothing but betrayal. She kept pleading, swearing it was a one-time thing, telling me it would never happen again. But I wasn't having it. Not tonight. Not ever. Maybe. Without saying a word, I shoved past her, grabbed a blanket and pillow from the closet, and made my way to the couch. That night, I slept there. For the first time in years, we weren't sharing the same bed. I could hear her crying from the bedroom, sobbing like she was the victim in all of this. It was pathetic, and for the first time, I didn't care. Let her cry. Let her drown in the mess she made. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. Every laugh, every fight, every night we shared, wondering if it was all a lie. The next morning was awkward, to say the least. I didn't get any sleep on that lumpy couch, and my head was pounding like I had just been in a fist fight. But the real battle was all inside me. I didn't know how to face the day. I sure as hell didn't know how to face Sophia. But, like always, she tried to act like everything could be fixed with a little breakfast and sweet words. I pretended to be asleep when I felt her tiptoe over to me, balancing a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, her face full of that pleading expression I used to fall for. "Hey," she whispered softly, trying to sound like nothing had happened. It wasn't real. I could feel it in my gut, but she wouldn't let go of the act. "I made you coffee, just the way you like it," she said, crouching down beside the couch, her eyes still puffy and red from crying all night, like mine were any better. I sat up, took the coffee, and just stared at her. There was something so twisted about it all, like she thought a cup of coffee could somehow erase everything that had happened, as if it was a peace offering for the mess she'd made. "Thanks," I muttered, the words thick with all the anger and hurt swirling inside me. "Mark, please," she said, her voice cracking, desperation creeping into every syllable. "I know you're hurting, but I meant it when I said I want to make things right. I'll do anything, anything to make this better." She was practically on her knees now, reaching out to grab my hand. "Please, just give me a chance. I love you. I'm so sorry." And then it hit me, a flash of clarity through the chaos. If she was willing to do anything to fix things, maybe I could use that. Maybe I could give her just enough hope to make her lower her guard while I figured out how to make her pay for what she'd done. I knew one thing for sure. Forgiveness was out of the question. Not even close. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, my face blank. "I don't know, Soph," I said slowly, as if I was giving it serious thought. "You really hurt me. You know that, right?" I know," she said quickly, nodding vigorously, almost pleading. "I hate myself for it, but maybe we can work through it. I'll do whatever it takes. Anything you want. Just please don't give up on us." I let out a heavy sigh, one I hoped sounded genuine. I gave her a long, cold look before answering. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "I'll think about it. But don't expect me to just forget what you did. It's going to take a lot to even consider forgiving you." Her face lit up like I had just handed her a second chance at life. She practically jumped into my arms, hugging me tightly. The smell of her shampoo, so familiar, so wrong now, filled my nose. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she mumbled into my chest. Her arms wrapped around me like she never planned on letting go. I had to fight the urge to shove her off me. Instead, I let her cling to me, letting her believe her apology meant something. all while my mind raced with ideas on how to use this situation to my advantage. Yeah, I said, gently pushing her away and standing up. We'll see. I've got to get to work. Her eyes, full of relief, were almost laughable. It was like she thought she dodged a bullet. Maybe she had, for now. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I got ready as fast as I could, needing to escape before the whole scene became too much. I needed space. Time to think. Sophia stayed in the kitchen, making small talk like everything was normal, asking if I wanted breakfast or if she should pack me a lunch like she used to do when we were newlyweds. It was almost pathetic, how badly she wanted things to go back to how they were. I couldn't stomach it. I grabbed my keys, muttering a quick, "I'll see you later," and left before she could push any harder. At work, I could barely focus. The office felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me as I tried to figure out what to do next. The hours dragged on, but all I could think about was meeting Ryan later that evening. He was the only one who knew what had happened, and I needed to hear what he'd found out about Ethan. I wanted to know everything: where he worked, where he lived, who he was. I wanted to make his life a living hell. The evening finally came, and I met Ryan at our usual diner, a greasy hole-in-the-wall with chipped vinyl seats and the best burgers in town. He was already there, sipping a Coke, his eyes sharp and focused like he was preparing for war. I slid into the booth. "What did you find?" I asked, barely able to contain my curiosity. Ryan grinned that sly, satisfied grin he always got when he had some juicy dirt to deliver. "Oh, I found everything," he said, leaning in like he couldn't wait to share. "Ethan is a real piece of work. Married, 2 kids, lives in a nice little house in the suburbs. Works as a project manager at some mid-level tech company downtown. Nothing too fancy, but comfortable." I clenched my fists under the table. Married? 2 kids? The hypocrisy made me sick. This guy was cheating on his wife while messing around with mine, all while pretending to be the perfect family man. It was disgusting. "That's not all," Ryan continued, his voice dropping lower. "I may have tipped off a few of my associates about him, just enough to get them interested. They're not the type to let things slide when a friend's been wronged. If you catch my drift." I nodded slowly, processing what he was saying. Ryan's associates were a rough crowd, the kind of guys you didn't want to mess with. But right now, I didn't care. If they could help me take Ethan down, I was all in. "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice low. "We meet tomorrow," Ryan said, leaning back and taking a long sip of his drink. "We confront him, make sure he knows he messed with the wrong people. And if things get a little physical, well, that's just the price he'll pay for messing with another man's wife." I nodded, feeling a rush of adrenaline and anger pulse through me. The thought of confronting Ethan, of seeing the fear in his eyes when he realized just how badly he'd messed up, made my blood race. This was it. This was my moment to take control back. "All right," I said, "let's do it." We went over the plan, making sure every detail was locked and tight. As I sat there, hashing out the details with Ryan, I felt a small sense of peace. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was finally doing something. Not just sitting by and letting everything happen to me. No, I was taking action. And I knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow was going to be a day Ethan would never forget. When I finally got home, Sophia was waiting for me. Her eyes were wide, like a dog waiting for its master to come home. "How was work?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled, as if she were testing the waters. I just shrugged, muttering a non-committal "fine," and walked straight to the couch. That made it clear. Sleeping in the bed wasn't an option. She didn't push me that night, didn't cry or beg like she had before. Instead, she slinked off to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a sense that things were about to change in a way she wasn't going to like. The next morning was tense the moment I opened my eyes. It wasn't just the nervous energy about what lay ahead. It was the sharp awareness of every little detail around me. The way Sophia moved quietly in the kitchen, like she was afraid to make a sound. The way she kept glancing at me, as if she could somehow read my mind. She had no idea what was really going on inside my head, and that's exactly how I wanted it. I kept my voice, my face, completely neutral. Every word I spoke felt like it had to be calculated, like one wrong move would blow the whole act. I'm heading out early today, I told her as I grabbed my keys. Got some things to take care of. Are you thinking about things? She asked, her voice trembling just enough to remind me why we were even in this mess. About us? I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before answering. Yeah, I said, keeping my tone flat. I'm thinking about it. She seemed to take that as a good sign, her face relaxing just a little, like she thought there was hope. And maybe that was part of the satisfaction I felt, letting her think she had the upper hand. But deep down, I knew she was at my mercy. The hours leading up to meeting Ryan blurred by. It's funny how time can speed up and slow down at the same time. 1 minute, the clock felt like it wasn't moving at all. The next thing I knew, I was pulling into the diner parking lot, my stomach churning with anticipation. Ryan was already outside, leaning casually against his car like he had all the time in the world. But I could see it in his eyes, the same readiness, the same focus. You ready? He asked, tossing me a mask. The black fabric felt heavy in my hand, like a tangible sign of what was about to happen. Yeah, let's do this, I replied, my voice steady despite how nervous I felt inside. We drove in silence, both of us fully aware that this wasn't the time for jokes or small talk. The drive felt like a lifetime, every turn heightening the tension, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just about some guy anymore. This was about making a stand, making sure that what Sophia did didn't just fade into the background like some bad memory. When we finally arrived, I could see them, Ryan's associates, standing in a half-circle at the back of the lot. And in the middle of them was Ethan. He looked uneasy, like he knew something was off, but couldn't quite figure it out. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm was about to break. We stepped out of the car, pulling on our masks, and walked toward the group. Ethan's eyes flickered over to me, and I could see the exact moment he started connecting the dots. His confusion shifted to fear. Look, man, if this is about something at work, he started, his voice already trembling. No, Ethan, I cut him off, my voice sharp and clear. This isn't about work. This is about you and my wife. I'll spare you the details of what happened next, but let's just say Ethan got the message loud and clear. He learned exactly who I was, who Sophia was, and what happens when you mess with another man's life. There were words exchanged, promises made, and by the time we were done, Ethan knew he'd never look at another man's wife the same way again. When it was over, I stepped back, catching my breath. The adrenaline, the anger, it was like a wave crashing over me. Ryan gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement that it was handled. We'd done what needed to be done. Let's go, Ryan said, and we walked back to the car, leaving Ethan there to rethink his life choices. The ride home felt different. There was no going back from what had just happened, and honestly, I didn't want to. For the first time, I felt lighter, like the weight of my anger had been lifted, at least for now. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be about Ethan anymore. No, the next step was Sophia, and that, I knew, was going to be a whole different game. By the time I got back to the house, it was well past dark. Sophia was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone, probably trying to distract herself from the reality of what our life had become. The second she saw me, she jumped up, her eyes wide with worry. Mark, I was so worried. You didn't answer your phone all day, she said, rushing over to me. Are you okay? Did you think more about us? I did, I said, keeping my face unreadable. But right now, I just want to take a shower and go to bed. Okay. She bit her lip, nodding like she was holding on to whatever tiny sliver of hope she thought she had. Of course. I'll let you rest. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and headed to the bathroom, turning on the shower and letting the hot water pour over me. I needed the silence, the moment to myself, before everything went further. It felt like I needed to scrub away every moment that had passed, like I could wash off the anger and betrayal with the water. Each drop felt like it was cleansing me, clearing my mind for what I had to do next. And right there, under the spray, it hit me. This wasn't finished. Not even close. The days that followed confronting Ethan felt like dragging my feet through thick mud. At home, I kept up the act, pretending I was even considering giving Sophia another shot. She was trying so damn hard to be the perfect wife, cooking dinner, cleaning, doing everything she could to make me feel comfortable. But all the while, I was letting her believe there was hope, letting her think I was willing to forgive her, while in reality, I was already well into the next phase of my plan. It was obvious how desperate she was. Every morning, she handed me a cup of coffee with that pathetic, hopeful smile on her face. Every night, she tried to get me to watch TV with her, desperately trying to be close to me. I could see it, the worry in her eyes, the fear that at any moment, I'd tell her it was over. But I didn't. I needed her to think she was winning me back, that her efforts were working. Finally, after letting her beg and grovel for days, I planted the seed that would push things forward. "Maybe we could start over," I said one night, keeping my tone neutral, as though I was casually thinking out loud. "I don't know, sophomore. No promises, but maybe." The change in her was instant. She practically lunged at me, grabbing my hand like it was her last lifeline. "Yes, yes, Mark, please. I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want. Whatever it takes." I played the part, pretending to consider it. "Okay," I said, dragging it out. "Let's try to have a nice night together. Like old times. Dinner, wine, just being together." She jumped at the chance, practically throwing herself into preparing the evening. That night, she went all in, cooked a full meal, set the table with candles, opened a bottle of wine. It was almost painful to watch how hard she was trying. I kept my act up. I smiled when she poured me another glass. I made light conversation, talking about our favorite trips, the little things that used to make us laugh. The wine flowed, and so did the conversation. Sophia's eyes were bright, hopeful, and she reached across the table, squeezing my hand tightly. "I love you, Mark. I'm so sorry for everything. I know I messed up, but I swear we can be happy again." I took a breath, letting it out slowly, pretending her words had an effect on me. "Yeah, maybe we can," I replied softly, and I could see the relief flood her face. That was all she needed to hear. From that point on, I let the night unfold however she wanted. She leaned in to kiss me, and I kissed her back, playing the part. We moved upstairs, and as the night went on, the tension between us built up. It was a mixture of anger and hurt, all those emotions we were pretending to share. But I wasn't thinking about healing. I was thinking about my plan, and I knew the exact moment to make my move. "Hey, Soph," I whispered, keeping my voice playful as I held her close. "I want to ask you something." "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft, and I could hear the desperation in it. "I want you to dance for me," I said, running my fingers down her arm. "A sexy dance, and I want to record it, just for us." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "Dance? Mark, I don't know. That feels... recording it?" "Come on," I said, giving her a smile that was meant to reassure. "You said you'd do anything, right? I just want something to remember tonight by. A fresh start. Something for just the two of us." For a moment, I thought she might back out, but then she nodded, slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "If it'll make you happy." I grabbed my phone, hit record, and watched as she stood up and started moving. She tried to make it sensual, swaying her body to some imaginary beat, putting on a performance like she really thought this would fix everything. I kept my eyes locked on her, nodding and smiling, encouraging her every move. She thought she was doing everything right. When the dance ended, I had exactly what I needed. A video that would be impossible for her to deny. The next morning, I woke early, careful not to disturb her. I didn't say a word. I dressed, grabbed my phone, and left the house without a single glance back. Instead of heading to work, I drove straight to a lawyer's office. The meeting was quick. Just a few signatures, some legal advice, and I walked out with the divorce papers in hand. By the time I got home, I was ready to deliver the final blow. Sophia was in the kitchen, bustling around making breakfast, her face beaming with the delusion that last night's act had somehow saved us. The smell of bacon filled the house, and she turned to me with that eager, hopeful smile. "Hey, babe," she said, all sweetness. "I thought maybe we could have breakfast together. I made your favorite." I walked over to the table, dropped the stack of papers in front of her, and said flatly, "Read these?" Her eyes flickered to the papers, then back to me. Her smile faltered immediately. "What? What is this?" she asked, flipping through the papers, her face slowly draining of color. Her breath caught as she realized what she was holding. "These are divorce papers." "Yeah," I said, crossing my arms. "I'm done pretending. Sign them." Her face crumpled as she dropped the papers like they were hot coals. "Mark? No, please," she cried, her voice rising in panic. "You can't do this. We were doing better last night." "Last night was nothing." I cut her off, my voice colder than ice. "You think one night makes up for what you did? Do you really think I could just forget that you cheated? That you lied to me? You deserve this, Sophia. Every bit of it." She broke down, shouting, crying, calling me cruel, heartless, begging me to reconsider, to not throw away everything. But I'd heard enough. Without another word, I turned my back on her and walked out. I left her there with nothing but the papers and the wreckage she made of our marriage. The next day, I woke up with a sense of calm. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The divorce papers were in Sophia's hands, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the rest of it fell apart. But there was one last step in my plan, the part that would ensure Sophia felt the full weight of what she'd done, just like I had. I spent the night at Ryan's after throwing the divorce papers in her face. I needed space from the chaos I'd left behind, but with a clear head and the final phase ahead, I was ready to do what I had to do. The next morning, I went through the contacts on my phone, friends we shared, the group chats we were both a part of, the acquaintances who knew us as a couple but would never expect what was coming their way. One by one, I sent out the video, Sophia's dance, the desperate act she thought would win me back. Now it was making its way to people who would make sure it got the attention it deserved. The subject line was simple. "Guess what my wife does when I'm not around?" Within hours, the responses came pouring in. In today's world, word travels fast, and shame travels even faster. Once that video was out, it spread like wildfire. Messages started flooding in, some from old friends, horrified by what they'd seen. Others from people I barely knew, but who had already heard the news. I knew it wouldn't take long for Sophia to catch wind of it. That evening, I came back to the house, knowing full well what awaited me. The place was a mess. Pillows scattered across the floor, dishes piled up in the sink. Sophia was sitting on the couch, clutching her phone. Her face was a mix of fury, fear, and devastation. "What did you do?" she screamed the second I walked through the door. "You sent that video? You sick bastard. How could you?" I stood there, watching her unravel, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. This was it. She was finally realizing what it felt like to have her world turned upside down. "You did this to yourself, Soph," I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos in the room. "You made your choices. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." She lunged at me, her hands trembling with rage, tears streaming down her face as she tried to hit me. "You ruined my life," she cried, her voice breaking. "I trusted you. I trusted you." I caught her wrists, pushing her away gently. "Now look where we are," I said coldly. She was hysterical, and I knew exactly how this would play out. "Call the police. Accuse me of sharing that video," I said, already knowing what would happen next. And that's exactly what she did. But I was one step ahead. Right after sending the video, I ditched my phone, tossed it in a dumpster. I filed a police report saying it had been stolen. I knew the system well enough to cover my tracks. When the authorities came knocking, I simply showed them my report and let them connect the dots. The evidence? It led nowhere. Sophia tried to fight it, of course, telling the cops I was behind it all, that I deliberately humiliated her. But without the phone, without any proof, her claims fell apart. She was left with nothing but the bitter reality of her own actions and the fallout from her betrayal. The social backlash was swift and unforgiving. Mutual friends cut her off. Gossip spread like wildfire, and her life in town became unbearable. Eventually, she had no choice but to sell the house. Anything she could to scrape together enough for a fresh start. She moved away, far from the whispers and the side-eye glances, far from the place where everyone knew what she'd done. In a way, That was her real punishment, knowing she'd always be running from the consequences of her actions. The divorce was finalized shortly after she signed the papers. The final thread that bound us together was severed, and as I watched her walk away, I felt nothing but clarity, a clean, cold break from the woman who destroyed everything we had. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was easy to move on. It wasn't. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering how we'd ended up here, how the woman I trusted with my entire life had turned into a stranger. But in the end, I didn't need a therapist to tell me how to process my anger or my grief. I did what I had to do, and I can live with that. And maybe that's what makes this different. It's not about forgiveness. It's not about finding closure or learning to let go. It's about facing what was done to me and dealing with it my way. The world isn't always black and white, but sometimes revenge is the only thing that makes sense. I know some people will judge me for what I did. Some will say I went too far. But I ask you, what would you have done in my place?